Hillstead Museum in Farmington, Connecticut is a place where art and nature flourish together, just as the family that designed this estate intended. Hillstead is a colonial revival house built at the turn of the 20th century and maintained today just as it was when the family that built it lived here. Hillstead is their outstanding art collection. Hillstead is 150 acres of fields, trails, and scenic views. Hillstead is May Market and other seasonal events for the whole family. Hillstead is also a beautiful sunken garden, the site of the annual Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. This program and the ones that follow are an invitation to you to attend this summer's series of poetry and music events.
If you're one of those people who encountered poetry back in high school and found it dull or obscure, you should try visiting Hillstead Museum on a summer evening and experience poetry in a whole new way. Every other week in the summer, hundreds of people converge at this beautiful estate to hear some of the best poets in the country read poetry that is relevant and accessible. People love the informality and outdoor setting of this festival. You can bring lawn chairs or blankets, pack a picnic, or buy dinner and wine from the vendors here. There's an hour of live music, anything from jazz to folk to classical, and then you can hear some of America's foremost poets. Hillstead has hosted the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival for over 20 years. One of the country's leading poetry events, the festival introduces audiences to U.S. Poets Laureate like Richard Wilbur and Natasha Trethewey, Pulitzer Prize winners, and other major American poets in the intimate and formal setting of the historic garden. The festival's ongoing popularity is evidence that poetry still holds an important place in American culture and that poetry has a unique power to remind us of our common humanity. We hope you will join us in the summer of 2014 as we welcome 5 outstanding poets, including Kevin Young, Frank Bedard, Alicia Ostreicher, Jeffrey Harrison, and Amy Nezukumatatil.
By the time I was 45 days old, I figuratively belonged to 3 countries and had lived in 3 cities. If that wasn't sort of an ironic sort of foreshadowing of what my work would be obsessed about or what my life would be obsessed about first, I don't know what is. So that those ideas of home, of those ideas or questions of place, of belonging obsessed me since I was a little kid, and with good reason. When I read, I feel that I'm standing in front of a mirror and the reader's standing right beside me. We're both looking at the mirror. Our lives are blurred. You're looking at me, I'm sort of looking at you, but we're all looking at the same thing. And that sense of the magic of what art and poetry in particular can do is very powerful. So as you sit there, do they allow beer or wine in here? I'm not sure. That would help. As you sit or stand or sit in front of the mirror with me tonight for a little while and ask the same questions that I've been asking all my life. Where am I from? Where do I belong? Who am I? So I really believed that America was what I saw on the Leave It to Beaver show and the Brady Bunch. I really, really believed that there was an America like this, that somewhere north of the Dade County line, there was the real America. And as I like to always joke, Miami felt like a cultural purgatory in a way. It was a waiting ground between the real imagined Cuba and the real imagined America. So that's the setting of this poem and some of the earlier childhood poems that obsessed me. Interesting, for just another side note before I begin, this first poem was actually my first creative writing assignment in my first creative writing graduate course at Florida International University. And we read some Ginsberg, we read some Frost, we read some Whitman, of course, and guess what my assignment was? Write a poem about America. Which, flash forward, was the same assignment Obama called for 15 years later. And you can see why this is a really old poem, and I had to blow the dust off of these things, some of them. But you can see why it's this perfect bookend for my life right now. 3 things you should know for this poem. Cubans never got Thanksgiving. In fact, they call it Sangiving, as in San Pedro or San Ignacio or whoever. Name a saint. Secondly, for Cubans, pork is not the other white meat. It's the only meat, period. And there's a line in here that thankfully the White House never seemed to have caught about Kennedy. And we don't need to get into the Bay of Pigs invasion in this crowd, but you know why the elders in my community sort of have an aversion to Kennedy. And this poem was called America. Although Tia Miriam boasted she discovered at least half a dozen uses for peanut butter, topping for guava shells and syrup, butter substitute for Cuban toast, hair conditioner and relaxer, Mama never knew what to make of the monthly 5-pound jars handed out by the immigration department until my friend Jeff mentioned jelly. Oh, but there was always pork, though. For every birthday and wedding, whole ones on Christmas and New Year's Eve, even on Thanksgiving Day, pork, fried, broiled, or crispy skin roasted, as well as cauldrons of black beans, fried plantain chips, and yuca con mojito. These items required a special visit to Antonio's Mercado on the corner of 8th Street, where men in guayaberas stood in Senate blaming Kennedy for everything. Ese hijo de puta. The bile of Cuban coffee and cigar residue filling the creases of their wrinkled lips, clinging to one another's lies of lost wealth, ashamed and empty as hollow trees. By 7, I had grown suspicious. We were still here. Overheard conversations about returning to Cuba had grown wistful and less frequent. I spoke English. My parents didn't. We didn't live in a 2-story house with a maid or a wood panel station wagon, nor vacation camping in Colorado. None of the girls had hair of gold. None of my brothers or cousins were named Greg, Peter, or Marcia. We weren't the Brady Bunch. And none of the black and white characters on Donna Reed or the Dick Van Dyke Show were named Guadalupe, Lázaro, Mercedes. Patty Duke's family wasn't like us either. They didn't have pork on Thanksgiving. They ate turkey with cranberry sauce. They didn't have yuca. They had yams, like the diddles of pilgrims I colored in class. So, a week before Thanksgiving, I explained to my abuelita about the Indians and the Mayflower, how Lincoln set the slaves free. I explained to my parents about the Purple Mountain's majesty, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, the cherry tree, the Tea Party, the amber waves of grain, the masses yearning to be free, liberty and justice for all, until finally they agreed this Thanksgiving we would have turkey, as well as pork. Abuelita prepared the poor fowl as if committing an act of treason, faking her enthusiasm for my sake. Mama set a frozen pumpkin pie in the oven and prepared candied yams following the instructions I had to translate from the marshmallow bag. The table was arrayed with gladiolas. The plattered turkey loomed at the center on plastic silver from Woolworths. Everyone sat in green velvet chairs. We had upholstered with clear vinyl, except Tio Carlos and Toti seated in the folding chairs from the Salvation Army. I uttered a bilingual blessing, and the turkey was passed around like a game of Russian roulette. Dry, Gilberto complained, and proceeded to drown the lean slices with pork fat drippings and cranberry jelly. Esa mierda roja. Translation, that red shit, he called it. Faces fell when poor Mama presented her ochre pie. Pumpkin was a home remedy for ulcers, not a dessert. Tia Maria made 3 rounds of Cuban coffee, then Abuelo and Pepe cleared the living room furniture, put on a Celia Cruz LP, and the entire family began to merengue over the linoleum of our apartment, sweating rum and coffee until they remembered. It was 1970 and 46 degrees in America. After repositioning the furniture, an appropriate darkness filled the room. Gilberto was the last one to go home. But seriously, she, incredible mother, of course. Anybody who reads through my books would understand that. But this moment particularly describes that very first moment that we have, that we all have with a parent, in this case with my mother, where they actually become human beings, where you actually understand that your parents are sentient, feeling beings. And it was my connection to sort of all of a sudden understand my mother was trying to do the best she could as well as I am. You know, the idea of just a person that can suffer, that can have loss, that can have triumphs. And that moment came while I was watching her at a grocery store. And the poem is called Mother Picking Produce. She scratches the oranges and smells the peel, presses an avocado just enough to judge its ripeness, polishes the Macintoshes, searching for bruises. She selects with hands that have thickened, fingers that have swollen with history around the white gold of a wedding ring she now wears as a widow. Unlike the archived photos of young, slender digits captive around black and white orange blossoms, her spotted hands now reach into the colors. I see all the folklore of her childhood, the fields, the fruit she once picked from the very tree, the wiry roots she pulled out of the very ground. And now, among the collapsed boxes of yucca, through crumbling pyramids of mangoes, she moves with the same instinct and skill. This is how she survives death and her son. On these humble duties that will never change, on those habits of living which keep a life alive. She holds up red grapes to ask me what I think, and what I think is this, a new poem about her. The grapes look like dusty rubies in her hands. But what I say is this. They look sweet, Mama. Very sweet. Crossing Boston Harbor. The horn blares, once, twice, sounding like iron, a dull slap heavy across the wind's face. And if the wind could have a face, it would resemble these strangers, blank as paper dolls propped up against the railing as the propeller torque vibrates through the vessel, slowly peeling the hull away from the barnacle dock. The limp roses coiled like dry roses on the metal deck, the anchor up like a rusty bow hung on the bow, and we move all together at the same speed to the same point. The ferry's shine makes an incision across the bay. Its churned waters bleed a wake of lustrous brew. Behind us, as we head west, scanning the coastline, nested with gables and fringed with flocks of sails, their peaks waning out of sight into memory until there's nothing left to measure our distance against. So much of my life spent like this, suspended, moving toward unknown places and names or returning to those I know, corresponding with the paradox of crossing, being nowhere yet here, leaning into the wind and light, uncertain of what I might answer the woman to my right, anchored in a flutter of curtains and leaning to the stern, should she lift her eyes from the sea toward me and ask, "So, Where are you from? This poem is sort of a whimsical look at that travel bug that I caught in search of home, in search of that perpetual hope we all have that sometimes gets the best of us, right? Because then we come home and we take a sigh and we're like, I'm home. You know, that was someplace else. So it's a sort of a whimsical look. I just need to mention as a poet that some of the really droll, like monotone lines here are not mine. They are taken from a brochure, and I'm having fun with that language in the poem. It's called We're Not Going to Malta. We're not going to Malta because the winds are too strong, our captain announces, his voice like an oracle coming through the loudspeakers in every lounge and hall, as if the ship itself were speaking. We're not going to Malta, an enchanting island country 50 miles from Sicily, according to the brochure of the tour we're not taking. But what if we did go to Malta? What if, as we were escorted on foot through the walled city of Medea, the walls begin speaking to me? And after we stop a few minutes to admire the impressive architecture, I feel Malta could be the place for me. What if, as we stroll the bastions to admire the panoramic harbor and stunning countryside, I dream of buying a little Maltese farm, raising Maltese horses in the green Maltese hills? What if, after we see the cathedral in Mosta saved by a miracle, I believe that Malta itself is a miracle? And before I'm transported back to the pier with a complimentary beverage, I'm struck with Malta fever. Discover I'm very Maltese indeed, and decide I must return to Malta, learn to speak Maltese with an English or Spanish accent, work as a Maltese professor of English at the University of Malta, and teach a course on the Maltese falcon. Or what if, when we stop at a factory to shop for famous Maltese ware, I discover that making Maltese crosses is my true passion? Yes, I get a Maltese cat and a Maltese dog, make Maltese friends, drink malted milk, join the Knights of Malta, and be happy for the rest of my Maltesian life. But we're not going to Malta. Malta is drifting past us, or we are drifting past it, an amorphous hump of green and brown bobbing in the portholes with the horizon, as the ship heaves over whitecaps wisping into rainbows for just a moment, then dissolving back right into the sea. Papa's Bridge. Morning, driving west again, away from the sun, rising in the slit of the rearview mirror, as I climb on slabs of concrete and steel bent into a bridge, arcing with all its parabolic Y-squared splendor. I rise to meet the shimmering faces of buildings, above treetops meshed into a calico of greens, forgetting the river below runs, insists on running, and scouring the earth, moving it, grain by grain. And if only for a few inclined seconds every morning, I am 12 years old with my father standing on the 10th floor window of his hospital room, gazing at the same bridge like a mammoth bone aching with the gravity of its own dense weight. The glass dosed by a tepid light reviving the city as I watched and read his sleeping, wondering if he could even dream in such dreamless white. Was he falling? Was he flying? Was he falling? Was he flying? Who was he? Who was I underneath his eyes,
flitting like the birds across rooftops, the early morning stars wasting away, the rush hour cars pushing through the avenues like the tiny blood cells through his vein, the ivy spiraling down like a string of clear licorice, feeding his forearm, bruised pearl and lavender, colors of the morning haze, and the pills on his tongue. The stitches healed, while the room kept sterile with the usual silence between us. For 3 days, I served him water or juice in wilting paper cups, flipped through muted soap operas and game shows, filled out the menu cards stamped bland diet. For 3 nights, I wedged flat, strange pillows around his bed, his body shaped like a fallen S, mortared in place by layers of stiff percale. When he was ordered to walk, I took his hand. Together, we stepped to the window and he spoke. "Mijo, you'll know how to build bridges like that someday." Today, I crossed this city, this bridge again, still spanning the silent distance between us, with the memory of a father and son holding hands and secretly in love.
Here's that poem, which is the title poem of what eventually came the whole collection, Looking for the Gulf Motel. Marco Island. There should be nothing here I don't remember. The Gulf Motel with mermaid lampposts and ship's wheel in the lobby should still be rising out of the sand like a cake decoration. My brother and I should still be pretending we don't know our parents, embarrassing us as they roll the luggage cart past the front desk, loaded with our scruffy suitcases, 24 loaves of Cuban bread, brown bags bulging with enough mangoes to last the entire week, our espresso pot, the pressure cooker, and a pork roast reeking garlic through the marble lobby. All because, mijo, we can't afford to eat out. Not even on vacation. Only 2 hours from our home in Miami, but far enough away to be thrilled by the whiter sands on the west coast of Florida, where I should still be, for the first time, watching the sun set instead of rise over the ocean. There should be nothing here I don't remember. My mother should still be in the kitchenette of the Gulf Motel, her daisy sandals from Kmart squeaking across the linoleum, stirring a pot of arroz con pollo, still gorgeous in her teal swimsuit and amber earrings. My father should still be in his terry cloth jacket, smoking, clinking a glass of amber whiskey in the sunset at the Gulf Motel, watching us dive into the pool, 2 boys he'll never see grow into men who will be proud of him. There should be nothing here I don't remember. My brother and I should still be playing parcheesi. My father should still be alive, slow dancing with my mother on the sliding glass balcony of the Gulf Motel. No music, only the waves keeping time. A song only their minds hear 10,000 nights back to their life in Cuba. My mother's face should still be resting against his bare chest, like the moon resting on the sea. And the stars, oh, the stars, should still be turning around them. There should be nothing here I don't remember. My brother should still be 13, sneaking rum in the bathroom, sculpting naked women from sand, and I should still be 8 years old, dazzled by seashells and how many seconds I can hold my breath underwater. But I'm not. I'm 38, driving up Collier Boulevard, looking for the Gulf Motel, for everything that should still be, but isn't. I want to blame the condos, their shadows for ruining the beach in my past. I want to chase the snowbirds away with their tacky McMansions and yachts. I want to turn the golf courses back into mangroves. I want to find the Gulf Motel exactly as it was and pretend for just a moment that nothing I've lost is lost. We're doing good.